We are live right now. This hangout is ready to go. Rock and roll time. It is the Audible Live each and every Thursday night right here on YouTube. YouTube.com/footballguysdotcom. You're also hearing us on iTunes, on the Audible Stitcher Radio. However you take in the show, we say thanks. Did I hear correctly? Spotify is going to do podcasts now too, so I'm sure that we'll end up on that platform as well. However you listen to the show or watch the show, we say thank you. We are tonight without Dr. Gene Bramwell as he takes a night off, much-deserved night off. So that means Sigmund Bloom, Matt Waldman in the house. Bloom, baby, what's up?
Cecil, I just have visions of Frank Gore and Andre Johnson and Colts uniforms in my head as the big I didn't do an E, but I did a squee because I just can't. I know it's still months and months away, but let's say I'm excited about the Colts offense.
Very excited about the Colts offense, and Matt Waldman's always excited. What's good tonight, Matt?
Man, I'm thinking Spotify. This could be pretty cool. We could listen to this show, and Amanda Riddle, Ryan Riddle's wife, could listen to this show with a Tower of Power soundtrack going on in the background. So this could be like a really cool thing. She probably really dig that, or at least the old people at her company who were dancing while she was rolling her eyes. So, yeah.
You're old.
I think we all are at this point, but we love fantasy football. We love talking about the National Football League, and we will jump right into it. But first, fellas, I do have to ask you both a question from my Monday through Friday ESPN radio show. On Tuesday, I did a dream come true. What is your dream come true sports moment? And the reason I did that is because on Tuesday, Faith No More's new album was released, Soul Invictus. If you don't have it, go get it. And it's the first time they broke up 18 years ago. Actually, my first day on the internet, years ago on web TV, I get on the internet, right? Like, you can learn anything you want. So outside of looking at pornography, I was like, okay, let me search Faith No More. And I found out that they'd broken up on my first day on the internet. So things a little bit different back then. Point is this. It was a dream come true for me, for them to get back together and actually release new music. I never thought I would experience that again. And it's been awesome and wonderful and amazing. So if a sports fan, as both of you are sports fan, if you could have a dream come true moment, what would it be? Now, people asked me, Bloom, and I said, well, as a Steelers fan, I've got six dream come true moments. Right. So I'm set there. I said, if the Knicks were ever worth a damn and won a championship in my lifetime, then that would be kind of my sports fan dream come true moment as a New York Knicks fan. Bloom, what would your sports dream come true moment be?
Well, Cease, first of all, I want to congratulate you on mentioning another sport. That's great. You're working on it. You're doing great.
Stop making fun of other sports, Cecil.
I will never get my chip for that anonymous.
So, and I will mention another sport too. No, for me, it was, and this was before the Steelers. So it was a long drought of the Steelers winning the Super Bowl. I was born in '75, so I wasn't really conscious, fully aware. So the Steelers winning the Super Bowl in Detroit, Super Bowl extra large, was a big one. But before that, it was Syracuse winning the national championship over Kansas. And I'm sorry. When I was in college in '96, Syracuse went to the Final Four, and it was beautiful. Like the game and they actually beat Kansas to go to the Final Four. It was a beautiful, amazing moment that I always remember. And then for them, once I was out of school, Syracuse basketball, of course, is everyone remembers Keith Smart in Indiana and the heartbreak. So for Carmelo Anthony and the crew of youngsters. To win that game, because it was a team that at the beginning of the season, I don't think anybody in their right mind would have seen them contending for a national championship. I think Jim Boeheim had just gotten married. He's back into a crotchety old man now, but had just gotten married and had loosened up. And to watch that team's run, I think they went through the Big 12 one after another, Oklahoma and then Texas and then Kansas. So it was really fun, especially being down here, watching Syracuse become the nemesis team of everybody and get that win. It was definitely the dream come true moment. And then those other two, Santonio Holmes, that was kind of fun too.
That was pretty there in the corner of the end zone. Matt Waldman, if you have a sports fan dream come true moment, what is it?
Well, this would probably be one of the fun little small dreams that I had is watching someone fake Ray Lewis out of his job. I mean, this is just it was just insane. So to watch like two of the better players in this generation, interact that way, that would be pretty good. So I'd say, obviously the Seahawks winning the Super Bowl against the Broncos to me was a minor dream come true. But I will honestly say that probably the sports dream come true. I mean, I've had some very close ones. Steve McNair was a yard away. Marshawn Lynch was a yard away. Ernest Biner was a yard away. So I think of all of those, what would be my sports dream come true would be that the Cleveland Browns get their bleep together and actually become a dominant team. But what I would like is, this is what I'd really like. I'd like them to hire Marty Schottenheimer again and tell the rest of the NFL, I can't make the gesture that I would use, but you can imagine, and let them just pound the ball into submission. Yeah, pretty much. No, it would just kind of be more, kind of that one, kind of more the shake and bake of that. So, but I would say that, but I'd like to see him get his chance again in Cleveland, and like the fans have to like do a 180 on him, and just see them kind of groveling over the fact that they wanted him gone in the first place, and then actually them come back and him win a Super Bowl before he died. I mean, he's still young enough. I mean, come on, Marv Levy was coaching in his 80s, so we can get Marty back. So that's my dream come true.
There's a gleam, gentlemen.
There's a gleam. That's right.
There's a gleam. Let's get into these news and notes across the National Football League. Again, no Dr. Gene tonight, but we did have an injury note this week. Derek Carr with the finger injury. Bloom, we're going to start there just because it sounds like no surgery needed. Sounds like everything's minor enough that by training camp he'll be ready to go. And what are your thoughts and expectations for Derek Carr this season, and specifically with those upgraded weapons around him? What do you got, Bloom?
Carr's been an interesting one because I think that coming out of the season, there was a perception, a somewhat wide perception, of, hey, the Raiders found their quarterback. And even though Carr, from a statistical perspective, I think he had, 21 touchdowns against 12 interceptions or something like that. And I remember that during the season, we were marveling at that. Thankfully, I don't think we were watching the Raiders games with a jeweler's eye. We were just expecting it to be really bad when Carr was named the starter to begin the season, and it wasn't that bad. But then people started going back in and taking the fine-tooth comb and looking over his performances, and really seeing that he was not that impressive. Now, was he impressive on the scale of a second-round quarterback thrown in with the Raiders right away with the offensive line they had, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? He was somewhat impressive. I think that's why there was that perception that, hey, at least the Raiders won't have to draft a quarterback in the first round this year, and with their top 5 pick, they can look at another position. And they did get Amari Cooper for him. But going back and looking at Carr, his performance wasn't promising in the sense of here comes Zook, right? Promising in the sense of being excited about the players he's going to throw to, or otherwise being excited about this offense. And perhaps even by the end of this season, we said, well, maybe they don't have quarterback figured out. In fact, if Carr plays the way he played last year, I would guess that would be the narrative. So it's hard for me to endorse Amari Cooper around that 5th, 6th round where he's going. It's hard for me to even want to spend a draft pick on Michael Crabtree or spend a draft pick on the Raiders running backs, even though Latavius Murray should be the guy. They don't seem to truly believe in him, and Trent Richardson just has something that makes teams want to keep giving him chances. So Derek Carr and his finger, and at least it sounds like he's not going to have surgery, if you're looking for anything else just to nudge you away from these offenses, and that's kind of how I'm starting at this high level right now, is just looking at surrounding offenses and really using that to sort players out. And the Raiders, it was funny, I forget who, Marcus Mosier, our guy, I think it was, did a top 5 players on each team. And just which core 5 would you like to have the most? And when he got to Oakland's and Jacksonville's, oh, so sad.
Well, you mentioned Latavius Murray there, Matt, so I'm going to pass the baton to you. And Lord knows we bring up quarterback play, and here comes Zook to give his opinion
He
on
is the
Derek Carr.
barometer for pocket presence.
He is. He
Yeah, I'm
is.
telling you.
But Latavius Murray there, of course, news reports coming out. He's excited for the season. Yes, yes, yes. It would be a news item if he wasn't excited. Like, Latavius Murray doesn't really care. But Latavius Murray excited, but as Bloom mentioned, Trent Richardson there as well. How does that part of the offense shake out? Do they try to run it a little bit more to help keep their young quarterback calm?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to need to do that. I mean, certainly with Carr, Carr to me is kind of like, he's kind of like a fish. For about two to three games, he's pretty good. But after a while, that pressure kind of makes him smell a little bit. So I'm a little worried about. I'm still a little worried about it. He was a guy that when I looked at Carr, he was on the border of where you would say, does he pass or fail in the area of pocket presence? Now, my internal barometer, my assistant here would tell you that he's failed miserably because the minute you brought him up, he jumped up here. But so it never fails. But I will say this: he got a little bit of a break at times in Oakland. He didn't look as bad as he looked at times at Fresno State. But I still think that he is going to need an awful lot of balance on that offense to succeed. And right now, there's a pretty big casting call at running back. So Latavius Murray, you look at the talent, and I've always liked his size, his hands. He's got that kind of herky-jerky movement that Kevin Smith had of the Lions. But you can also see that he has a little more athleticism that he brings to the table. The interesting thing, though, is that you look at these backs, and the backs are a lot like the wide receivers for the past couple of years. It's kind of a land of misfit toys where you have, you got Murray, Roy Halou, and then Richardson. Then you still have the Tywan Jones maybe hanging around. What are they going to do with him? And then there's Michael Dyer and George Atkinson.
And Marcel Reese.
And Marcel. We can't forget Marcel Reese. He might be the most complete back in that backfield. And he's, of course, sitting there as a fullback. So
it's
I would
like Darren Sproles never left San Diego,
Yeah.
just stuck somewhere where they don't know how to use him.
Absolutely. So, I mean, looking at this, I think Murray has a puncher's chance to be the starter, but I would say as the starter, he's going to be the lead back. It doesn't mean that he's going to be the feature back. I would be surprised by that only because Reese is so reliable. He's a veteran, and I think that teams just feel like that you have to be a really special player to be a feature back, and it's going to take this year for him to probably convince the Raiders and some really grand games that he can be that man. It would be like a year's tryout. The way Ray Rice, when he looked really good his second year, they still had him paired with McGahee for the next year or two before he got the full load. So I think it would be the same thing for Murray as the upside. I'm not exactly excited about him, but if I could get him in the later rounds of a draft, or I guess not later, but I'd say rounds 8 to 12, somewhere in that range, I would, if he could slip that far, I would be interested. If he's going higher, then at that point I'd probably pass, unless I'm going, upside down, zero RB, whatever you want to call it.
Well, and that's my next question for you, Bloom, is right now his ADP in 12-team PPR leagues is running back 20. So fantasy owners at the end of round 4 are going ahead and adding Latavius Murray, running back 20, with the way that we're talking about his potential season. Bloom, that still seems too high.
Definitely too high. And look, I went back and watched some Latavius Murray because this is the same thing that happens whenever somebody breaks a long run in the preseason. Except in this case, it was on a Thursday night, and against a Kansas City defense, which I believe hadn't allowed a rushing touchdown to date in the season, and it was in the second half of the season. And he had one particularly nice run, and his size-speed combination really came to the surface. It was a little bit of over pursuit. And remember, Kansas City was playing with some terrible inside linebackers at times last year, and he cut it back, and then he was able to take it to the house. But watching him in some other games, and we saw him at Texas versus the Nation, right? And you could see that Murray's size and speed can get into play. It's just like we talk about when we're scouting players for the draft, where we say, sure, he has this ability to make big plays in college. How often is he going to get a chance to use that in the pros? And Murray did get to use his pure size-speed combination with enough agility on that play. But then watching him in later games, which is not that impressive. And looking at him, I have him at running back 30 right now in PPR, and at the very least, in the range that he's going, I'm going to take easily guys like C.J. Spiller, Andre Ellington. These guys are no-brainers. Justin Forsett, if he slides, although I think people are wising up to Justin Forsett now and taking him within the top 20 running backs. Jonathan Stewart, I would take. Lamar Miller, if people sleep on him. Of course, Frank Gore. I don't even need to say that now. But even some guys like Amir Abdullah. I think Isaiah Crowell is situated in a similar fashion to Murray as far as his likely workload, but I think Crowell's better. Crowell has a better offensive line in front of him. Even Rashad Jennings, and I will tell you, Rashad Jennings is one of those running backs, I know Matt Waldman is going to agree with me, who's still underrated, who's still not being given the credit for the quality of running back that he is. And, look, when it's game time, I know you got Shane Vereen, and I know Will Beatty's out for 5 to 6 months, and Eric Flowers is going to be put on the spot, so maybe you go to even more passing, although Flowers... perhaps you have a little more power running with Andre Williams, but my point is this: like when the bullets are flying, you're still going to want Rashad Jennings. Rashad Jennings is still the closest thing they have to a 3-down back. He's still a very rugged running back around the goal line. Andre Williams just isn't that good. So I think Rashad Jennings is a player that we're collectively underrating both in NFL and fantasy terms. There's a lot of running backs I would take ahead of Latavius Murray where he's going if he's going as the 20th off the board.
Well, and that's the thing. At this point of the season, and things will change by the time a majority of you out there listening start to draft, but there's drafts going on right now where there's overreaction and there's underreaction, and we're going to highlight both on tonight's program, the Audible Live. Let's spin this one around because, Bloom, it seems like every single day there's some sort of Matt Jones story, and I don't know what the hell I missed in watching this kid in college. Matt, I'm going to toss it to you first. Bloom, I want you at the ready because we talk about Matt Jones. Here's a sampling of the headlines that we've commented on at footballguys.com on our newswire. Our free daily newsletter is out. Make sure to subscribe to that as well. These are just the headlines, mind you. Matt Jones gives Washington depth. Matt Jones, love the offense. Matt Jones shows versatility. Some about Alfred Morris. Matt Jones, the future in Washington? ? More Matt Jones, Alfred Morris news headlines. There was also a headline, I'm trying to find it right now, where Matt Jones was compared to Marshawn Lynch. God bless him if it was a beat writer or whatever. I don't know who exactly it was. I have the story. Matt Jones, the future in Washington. This is from the NFL.com newswire. Matt Jones was compared to Seattle Seahawks running back Marshawn Lynch by general manager Scott McCloughan because of his love of contact and downhill running style. Marshawn Lynch isn't blind. Matt Jones, in watching him in college, is a poor man's version of Ben Jarvis Green Ellis. Stop with the. I just want to scream at the newswire someday, Blue, and be like, stop with the Matt Jones. Like, why are we getting excited about this guy? Sure, is he big and in a straight line? Does he love to punish people? Yes, but he's also blind to cutback lanes. He misses where he should go. He's not creative or elusive at the second level. We're talking about a guy who has just a guy tendencies. Again, Ben Jarvis Green Ellis, but a poor man's version of that. Bloom, be at the ready. Matt, you're up first, though. This whole Matt Jones thing, I swear to God, every day, Matt Jones, he's not Marshawn Lynch, for the love of all things holy. What am I missing here? Am I missing anything about Matt Jones? Because I never saw this in college.
Okay. Well, here's the deal. I think the comparison to Marshawn Lynch is absolutely crazy. But I think at the same time, I look at him and I would say that he is a more savvy version of Michael Bush. And I think that if you look at Michael Bush and how he played, I felt like came into this league and did not have strong vision. I did not think that he was decisive between the tackles, and I felt like that he had a lot to learn. And he did. He never turned into the back that people were really, hoping for because of him being the 6'2", 250 fast guy. And I think that Matt Jones doesn't have Michael Bush's speed. He has some bursts where you can see on film moments where he can take the corner. I have seen plays where he does show some second-level agility, but I would say that he is a guy that when you look at him, he's a good fit for Washington's offense based on if you were still looking at the Kyle Shanahan offense, where you can take any guy and put him in there, and he can look pretty good if he has NFL talent. I think that Matt Jones has NFL talent. I think that I think there's room for him to develop. I think that there's room for him to get better at some of the conceptual areas of his game. And when I say there's room for that to happen, there's no guarantee that it will. There's no guarantee that it will for anybody that we bring that comes into the league. But I'll say this. I like the fact that he feels like he was misused at Florida. There are a lot of players who look like they've been misused at Florida. You could say Dante Fowler was misused at Florida, or you could say that he was used in every possible way they could give him a chance, and they're not really caring about what the NFL thinks. And so I think that there's a little bit of that there with Matt Jones. I do like that he can catch the football, and I think that there's potential for him where maybe if he shows enough in this camp and he learns enough through this year that he should be able to get some extra work in. And, obviously, I think this guy over here seems to like that. He's licking his chops as a defender here to almost salivating over the opportunity. But I would say that, overall, Matt Jones to me isn't as bad as like, oh, he's horrible, why are we talking about him? But I would say we shouldn't be comparing him to Marshawn Lynch. I would be comparing him to a guy who could be a committee back for you at some point in his career if everything works out well, or in an offense where if Scott McCloughan is correct, and he is a guy who's helped build two very strong teams in this league and have found guys that people were like, I don't know about these guys. So I would lean to the direction to say if he builds up this offensive line the way he wants to, Matt Jones could be the guy that at the end of the day, someone who loves him will say, see, he's a starter, he's good, and someone who doesn't like him will go, he's still not a great back, and I'll say this, I don't think he'll ever be a great back. I don't think he'll ever be anything more than a pretty good starter who gets good production behind a very strong offensive line.
Yeah, and don't put him in a zone scheme. Don't give him choices as a runner. That would be bad.
Right.
Like, just power scheme it. Bloom, your thoughts here. And remember, the last guy that most of us compared to Michael Bush, most of us, not everybody, but the last guy that we said that was named Daniel Thomas. Your thoughts here. Yeah. Everyone trying to shuffle Alfred Morris out the door. It's his final year of his deal. What is the real truth here with Jones in this Washington situation, Bloom?
I saw a player, a contributor, a guy who fit in the NFL. I saw Jones as a big old third down back, a guy who is good in all of those auxiliary facets of the passing game, blocking and receiving out of the backfield, short yardage running. He's just a stubborn runner, good leg turn, decent intensity. And for a big guy, he has decent feet, he has decent speed. You just don't see him with a lot of kinetic energy. You don't see him winning collisions. You don't see him with a lot of juice through his cuts and burst that makes you think that he's going to be, like Matt said, this is one of the things that really messes with us when we're predicting scouting onto fantasy football outcomes, because by far, running back can be a position. Look at Dallas, where we might say, is he adequate? Is he competent? Because that's all it takes in certain situations. So, like Matt is projecting this future where Washington has Brandon Scherf and Trent Williams, and a bunch of other hosses on this offensive line. Then sure, Matt Jones and his good enough feet and good enough burst, and mainly his size and stubborn running style, and also, like Matt was saying, this is the mitigating factor that Florida just didn't set him up well for success. It's possible, but when I watched Matt Jones, it didn't take long, like a minute or two, to say he belongs in the NFL, but he's not going to be one of the 32 best runners in the NFL, or otherwise a runner that makes us say, oh, so you got to get him on the field, you got to get him more touches. And it did seem like a bit of a reach in this running back class, especially to take him on the second day.
When we talk about strengths and weaknesses with all of us as talent evaluators, and with the fantasy hat on, it's different, Bloom, because Matt Asiata, I've said
Sure.
it a million times. The first week he blew up, I was telling everyone under the sun, like, he's a freaking fullback. Why would you want Matt Asiata? 3 touchdowns later. So there is that opportunity there for Jones, Bloom, provided that Morris moves on, which he probably will, because they're moving on from his best style of offense.
Yeah, when Morris is I'm not sure. I am starting to slide Morris down my rankings, only because he's not going to contribute in the passing game, and all of this talk and this buzz about Matt Jones, even though I don't think it necessarily would be deserving for Jones to usurp touches, not the third down touches, but the bread and butter touches, it just feels like Washington is going to try to see what they have in their third round pick pretty early on. But Alfred Morris is one of those players that maybe Washington does let him go because they don't want to pay him. He's probably only going to get $4 or $5 million a year on the open seat market, if that. And Washington might say, and then maybe we see him end up someplace like Houston. Maybe we see him end up someplace where Atlanta, Geez, now you got the wheels turning. Man, like Atlanta should trade for him. Oh. Anyway, my point is Alfred Morris is still a good running back. Alfred Morris is still a really good running back. And I do think that the Shanahan scheme accentuated his strengths, but I think it's not that hard for his next team or for Washington, if they so choose to accentuate those strengths. And he's another running back. We could just go down a whole list of guys. And I watched a lot of Miami Dolphins today. Lamar Miller to the list. We were talking about Rashad Jennings. These are all running backs that, because they haven't been fantasy studs, we don't give them the due that they have earned as NFL running backs. And in the case of Lamar Miller, he may still come through as a fantasy back, yet just turned 24.
Yeah, and you mentioned Lamar Miller there, again, in the final year of his contract, just like Alfred Morris. I'm way more excited about Jay Ajayi than I am about Matt Jones. And Bloom, it took us all of 25 minutes where I'm going to bring up Tevin Coleman. And Matt, I want you to know I did get an email from a listener the last time we did a live show that was mad that you and I didn't argue more about Amir Abdullah and Tevin Coleman, and he thought it was funny because I said, we could have the debate every single week. Is that what you want? He's like, yeah. Tevin Coleman, Amir Abdullah, round 70. But he also did say it was funny that Abdullah was picked by the Lions because that's where motorboating was invented because of Mikel Assure. And you brought up Kevin Smith, Matt, and if memory serves correctly, that was another debate that we had. What is it with Lions running backs, man? Like, we get all in our heads about Lions running backs, whatever side of the fence we're on.
Maybe we could reinvigorate Detroit. We just need to move there and have a fight, and then we can, and obviously, we at least that one guy would show up. Maybe he happens to have Mark Cuban like money, and he could promote the event, and we could reinvigorate Detroit.
Protect the den out
That's
at
right.
Ford Field. I saw the Mustang, the new Mustang outside of Ford Field. That was pretty nice. It is the Audible Live each and every Thursday night. We're talking and talking and talking more about news from around the NFL. Bloom, I think you and I have a great appreciation for Chan Gailey, for what he did during his time with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I've said it once, said it 1,000 times. Like, he gets the most. When he worked with Cordell Stewart was at his best. Mike Mularkey did a good job with Cordell as well. And now Chan, thank you, Chan. First, let me just say that, because usually, Bloom, we get to this point of the year, it's like, well, it's a competition. We're going to see. No. Chan Gailey coming out and saying, here's your quarterback, and it's Geno Smith. We will not see a competition in training camp. It will be Geno Smith. I love that about Chan Gailey, Bloom, because you eliminate any sort of the competition talk. You also set Smith up with a lot of confidence coming off a year where he ended it fine, 358 and 3 touchdowns against Miami in Week 17. I know, but still, with what Gailey can do, what he did with Tyler Thigpen, and talking to Matt Littlefield, former scout with the Chiefs, who was there when Gailey was there, and they revamped everything in a week for Tyler Thigpen, and Tyler Thigpen was okay under Chan Gailey. So Gailey is an offensive coordinator. I love it. I think you appreciate it as well, Bloom. What can he do with Geno Smith? Do you like the fact that he announced that he's the starter right now this week? That news item came out on Wednesday.
Yeah, and in fact, that reminded me that I need to go back and look at where I have Geno Smith in my rankings, because that was really the big question about ranking Geno Smith. would he have the job? And it makes sense to me for a lot of reasons. You pointed out a great reason, I think, with confidence for Geno Smith, but also just reps in the off season, in the preseason, in training camp. Ryan Fitzpatrick knows Chan Gailey's system and coaching style. He had his best years under Chan Gailey in Buffalo. So also remember Fitzpatrick's coming off of a broken leg. I don't know the exact details of that injury, but his advanced age, advanced late portion of his career, you want to give him as much time as possible to get up to full speed, and you have him as the, well, if Geno's just not cutting it, we've got Fitzpatrick. But what I like about Geno and Gailey is Gailey's going to set him up in a natural environment for his aggressive passing mindset. If people might pan Geno Smith on the whole, but one thing he's been really good at, especially for a quarterback in the first 2 years of his career on a Rex Ryan team, mind you, and Buffalo Bills fans, you're going to know, and Chase Stewart's nodding along somewhere, like you're going to know what that means when I say on a Rex Ryan team.
West.
Yeah. The point is that Geno Smith was aggressive attacking downfield. I want to say his yards per attempt was actually very good. And he made a lot of mistakes, a lot of throws. Some of the stuff we saw with Jameis Winston, where some of the things he would try, you to be like, oh man, like that's not happening. Not that he was confused or crossed up by the defense, but just he bit off more than he could chew. But the point is that he will take a bite. And you have now Brandon Marshall. That sounds like the kind of receiver that works with an aggressive passer. Eric Decker, Jason Morrow, Devin Smith now. I think that Chan Gailey's going to set Geno Smith up for success. Geno Smith has also been a pretty productive runner as a quarterback. I don't think Chan Gailey is against using that. And I think the Jets in general, I'm really getting exuberant. I'm getting my exuberance back about some of these teams. And I think the analogy that I've used before, Cease, that I'm going to pull out again because it's getting that time, it's like when we were in middle school, first few years of high school, and we'd all go away for the summer. You had your friends, maybe there'd be some parties and you see some people. But then when school would start again, in late August, you'd be like, man, what happened here? Like when all your friends are going through puberty, all of a sudden somebody comes back 3 months later, a different person than the last time you saw them. And that's going to be the Jets this year with their defense, which I've already fanned myself about once they got Leonard Williams, Darrelle Revis, Antonio Cromartie. Now you have an aggressive offense. And like you said, that clarity, the confidence you build around Geno Smith, I like it, and I think the Jets are going to be an extremely different team than the last time we saw them, an exciting team to watch, and a team that will have a puncher's chance in any game against anybody because of the talent and the way they're deploying that talent under Todd Bowles.
Only 3 other quarterbacks last year were blitzed as much as Geno Smith. Joe Flacco, number 1, 37% of his snaps were blitzed on. Cam Newton and Josh McCown. Then there's Geno Smith. We'll see how he does under that pressure, how Chan Gailey responds to that as well. Matt, your thoughts here on this Geno news?
I think this relates also to the Matt Jones conversation that we've had and what you brought up earlier, Cecil, which is that when you look at players, especially from a fantasy football standpoint or even just an evaluation or media standpoint, there's a tendency for us to be kind of like, if they aren't going to be superstars, they're not worth squat. There's that kind of tone that kind of happens with these guys. I was watching this with Field Yates on ESPN. Field Yates is a terrific guy and does terrific work. But I was listening to him today talk about Geno Smith, and you kind of see the smile and see the tone that's kind of there, which is, and what he said, which is, I'm not counting. This is written in pencil. I'm not counting on him to be the starter. I'm not. This is. We still have a long preseason and competition. I expect this to happen. But it's not just Field Yates, so I'm not getting on his case. But he's an example of, as a collective group of writers, I think we tend to look at players and go, if they aren't elite, then if they're not elite, then we have room to dissect them, and question whether they're even good enough. And I think that football is much different than that, because coaches look at players and go, is this guy good enough to help my team if the rest of my team plays well? Because as a coach, I'm not looking at a quarterback to say necessarily all the time, where I'm not looking at my quarterback and going realistically, well, Geno Smith could be a top 3 quarterback in this class. He could be every bit as good as Peyton Manning in the span of a year, and he's going to carry our team to a Super Bowl. No, this team's looking at it and going, Geno Smith is good enough that if we can have a great defense and a good running game, we should make it to the playoffs. And maybe it will make it easy enough for him to grow that he grows into a competent quarterback that can help our team for the next, I don't know, 3 to 5 years and win some playoff games and do some work for us that's pretty good. I don't know, Brad Johnson won a Super Bowl. Rich Gannon for a while before he had that MVP season, you look at him and go, competent player. There are a lot of guys like that. Coaches don't look at it as we're trying to draft a superstar. We're hoping we get a competent guy that can develop and grow. The problem is that the media pressure, the owner pressure, sometimes the general management involved can have the pressure that it's like, we need these guys to be superstars. And if we're getting all this bad PR in the media about how these guys look, well, we need to make a change. Even though, someone like Chan Gailey might be putting the building blocks together, that this team could be really competent with a guy like Geno Smith if he plays decently enough. So to me, the whole thing comes down to this: as fantasy owners, we're looking for top 3 to 5 players on a regular basis for everything that we do. But at the same time, you can still look at how you build a team and realize that if you have one position where the guy's consistent enough and he gives you top 7 to 10, top 7 to 12 production, and it's consistent each week, especially at the quarterback position where you look at it and the difference isn't as great there as it is as other positions like running back and wide receiver and tight end. Well, you might be able to get by with a guy that everyone else is going to turn their nose up at, but if you can you can get studs at the other positions, Geno Smith might turn out to be not such a bad choice after all.
It is the Audible Live each and every Thursday night here. You're listening to us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, watching us on YouTube. Thank you all, everyone. Look at my pretty new hat. It says Chicago. Anyway, let's move on, and let's stay with the Jets, though, Bloom, because another news item that came out on the newswire at footballguys.com, several stories about the running back situation there. Stephen Ridley is going to be ready in the air. And this staff, Todd Bowles and company, they don't have any affiliation to the former regime's guys. Then that means guys like Chris Ivory there. But Ivory, Ridley, they make the move to add Zach Stacy. You still got Bilal Powell. Hell, even Daryl Richardson, who's got some talent. You got a nice group of backs here. Does one of them emerge? Is this some sort of committee, Bloom, from a fantasy's perspective? How much you're going to tear your hair out trying to figure out who's on first with the Jets?
Well, at least in MFL 10s, and we're doing a staff MFL 10 right now in a best ball format. I'm liking Chris Ivory, and here we go. I'm gonna tie this together. If you want to compare a running back in the NFL right now to Marshawn Lynch, Chris Ivory's not a bad choice. I've said Chris Ivory's like Marshawn Lynch if he was human. And here's what I come back to at this time of year sometimes. I know Chris Ivory's good. I know Stevan Ridley in a different way, but Ridley's coming off of an ACL tear, and Chan Gailey offenses aren't very conducive to fantasy production, but I do think that Chris Ivory's going to be your best short yardage runner on this team. I think that Ivory showed a better ability to stay healthy last year, and I just think that he's a good running back. When I've watched him, much like Lynch, he has that compact frame, power generated, but good burst, good instincts in the open field, breaks a lot of tackles, has an extra gear when he gets in the open field. Is he going to be a 300 carry running back? No. But could he easily be a running back who is flex-worthy, a running back who breaks long runs enough that, especially if you're playing matchups, he's going to be somebody you're happy to have, say, as your fourth running back. You can get him in the 10th or 11th round. Yes. So Ridley, we just need to see more. Ridley could be anywhere from maybe a 1A, a 1B situation with Ivory to not even making the team. because of Zach Stacy, which Zach Stacy is one of those, hey, let's see. But I think Ivory's still superior, clearly a superior talent. So in this case, while I do think you're not going to see a true featured back, I think Chris Ivory is somebody that we still haven't given credit for the runner that he is, and I think they're going to make good use of him. He did not miss a game last year. He was, he had a handful of 100-yard games, handful of games over 15 carries. I think he can definitely do that again this year. So again, from a best ball perspective, where you're getting those games automatically counted, 10th, 11th, 12th round, I'm liking it, and even in redraft, I'm liking it just because I know he's a talent, and this is going to be a much improved offense.
An improved offense with this ground game, which now is up in the air. Matt, how do you look at this Jets running back situation?
I mean, I agree with Bloom with Ivory. I mean, I think Ivory has more burst than Marshawn Lynch. He's just not as smart of a runner and as powerful and balanced. But I would say that very few runners play with that kind of intensity. Ivory approaches it. He comes close enough that you're like, yeah, sure. I mean, I got the, you could get the Mercedes out of the, you could get the Mercedes model out of the, out of the store, or you could get it at the used car lot and put a little bit of work into it and still feel pretty good about it. And I think that that's kind of what you get with Chris Ivory is someone that has really strong burst, someone that can make the cutbacks, and a player that does not go down with first contact, maybe not second contact. Now, Marshawn Lynch doesn't go down with fourth and fifth contact, and that's why he
sixth and seventh.
Yeah, exactly. And then still says, get out of my way, like Steve Smith does at 195 pounds. But, we're going to – I would look at this and say, yeah, Ivory is probably by and far the best back in this class. In this depth chart, and then you've got Zach Stacy aiming to prove. So to me, it's going to be those two guys that I would be looking at right now, just because Ridley's the question mark with the knee. If he looks good, then Ridley could probably beat Stacy, as long as he can hold on to the ball. But if that's not going to happen, or he kind of his career goes down in the dumps because he felt like he wasted an opportunity in New England, then you're looking at probably the Ivory Stacy show, with Bilal Powell charming the team with his third down skills and basically getting you his sub 4 yards per carry and blocking occasionally. So I think that's what you're going to end up with.
A charming Bilal Powell.
Yeah.
Really briefly, another way I would characterize Ivory is and this is also very Lynch-like, he just always runs hot. There's not times when you're watching, you're like, now the switch is turned on. The switch is always turned on from him. But you bring up Bilal Powell, and we can't necessarily forget about him just because Ridley, Ivory, these aren't the most durable backs. We'll see about Stacy. And like you said, Powell has this thing, it's like Sean Green. Like, coaches see him as more than he is, but that adds fantasy value, even though it doesn't actually make them a better player.
Last year, Chris Ivory, in yards after contact, ranked 13th out of all running backs. Everybody else had less than 200 carries. Everybody else is well over 200 carries, and some obviously including DeMarco Murray, close to 400 carries. So this guy was 413 yards after contact, and he had the fewest amount of carries of anyone else above him on this list. So you see how he loves that contact, loves to pick up those yards after contact as well. As the Audible rolls on, and we're going to get off the Jets offense for just a second. We're going to talk about a very, very fantasy-relevant running game. And, Bloom, you know who it is. It's Dallas. Dallas is trying out everybody. Josina Anderson today had the story. Ben Tate working out for Dallas. Another story coming through. This one from Brian Broaddus, who we've had on this show. Felix Jones going to work out. To which I then said, Bloom, we'll just get Peyton Hillis back, and then Jerry Jones, the Arkansas alum, he's going to have his Arkansas trio that years ago tore up college football with Hillis, Darren McFadden, and Felix Jones. So they're working guys out. We've had the Joseph Randle thing is all over the board, right? All over the board. And we've brought this up a little bit, but you talk to some people, they laugh at the mention of his name. You talk to other people, and they say, this is the guy. Newswire story came through yesterday. This is from the Dallas News. Joseph Randle, the logical leader of the running back by committee. And this team is so damn good up front that last season, in rushing yards before contact, DeMarco Murray would have been, in just rush yards before contact, DeMarco Murray would have been the 8th best running back in the league. In just yards before contact, he had 1,107 yards before contact. The next closest looks like 901. That was actually Justin Forsett. So 1,100 yards before contact. We know about this offensive line. What are we supposed to think about these guys working out? Dallas just updating their emergency list, Bloom. Are they maybe concerned, as perhaps they should be, with Joseph Randle and Darren McFadden as their leaders in the clubhouse, so to speak? And will this be a team that is watching that wire closely for any back that's trying to sneak through to the practice squad, as years ago we saw with Tennessee trying to do with LeGarrette Blount, and then he goes on to have success with the Buccaneers in that rookie season. What are you taking away from this Dallas news that we've got this week, Bloom?
Well, the news from this week, I think, doesn't really change things. I do think it's more of an emergency list. I do think it's more of kicking the tires on these guys and seeing what they have if they have to come back to this list later in the season. However, and it isn't related to this news from today, I don't think that the depth chart you see today is the depth chart they will go into the season with. I'm going to mention the name Thomas Rawls again. He's in Seattle, and if Seattle keeps him on the active roster, then obviously Dallas won't get a shot at him, but Dallas wanted him. It was originally announced, actually CMU Athletics Twitter account announced he'd signed with Dallas, so there's obviously interest there. I think the fit is better. I think I honestly would say that Rawls, depending on where Ryan Williams is at, but I would say he might be the best talent out of the four of them as a pure running talent at this point, based on what we've seen demonstrated by the others. But what makes Randle so fascinating is he's a different running back than he was at Oklahoma State. He's running with more conviction. He's running, I think, breaking more contact, getting yards after contact, breaking more tackles. Otherwise, showing a more rugged side to his running that he did not have at Oklahoma State. The other thing that's fascinating about him is this knucklehead and all the trouble he's gotten into. He's still on the roster. So Dallas must like something about him because a lot of other players with the things that he's rung up would have been kicked to the curb just so they wouldn't have to answer questions about him anymore. So they may see something there that he can contribute. But we know that Darren McFadden, I don't think Darren McFadden looked bad last year, honestly. I think that he still ran with the same intensity that we're used to. It's just Oakland. Going back to why we shrug our shoulders about Latavius Murray, it's Oakland. But Dallas, that's a whole different proposition. That being said, going back to MFL 10s or early drafts or even early rankings, I'm very reluctant to react, even as a shot in the dark. Now, if it's August and nothing has changed, I'm much more open to these guys as shot in the dark in the 10th, 11th, 12th round or later, because it's actually, I think, a bonus plus of a draft pick of the second half of your draft if you can know within the first few weeks what you have. You either have Dallas a starter, cha-ching, or you have someone you can cut for who knows, whatever's going on in the first few weeks of the season. But right now, I feel like draft picks spent in June, May on the Dallas backfield may be rendered irrelevant by the time we get to August. So I'm reluctant to invest in them at all. And in dynasty leagues, I would be trying, if anyone comes around sniffing around your Dallas backs, probably trade them, just because I think the most likely, most valuable Dallas running back is somebody not on the roster right now.
Well, and we look at the Ryan Williams situation, the rest of the backs on the roster. Matt, as I toss this topic to you, I will say this, and we brought up Mikael Lasher earlier in the program. Mikael Lasher was at the Veteran Combine alongside Liam's quarterback coach and Zach Robinson, was at the Veteran Combine earlier this year. I think Zach might have run faster than Mikael Lasher, and I'm only being half sarcastic. Mikael Lasher was like a 5-something 40. Once you have those major injuries, and both those guys in the same draft class, Ryan Williams, we all loved him at Virginia Tech. Damn you, TD Lee Suggs. But, I mean, we all loved Ryan Williams. But after these injuries this long, super long shot, I would love the story if Ryan Williams was ever worth a damn at the pros level. I'm not counting on it. Matt, you heard what Bloom had to say. Your thoughts?
Yeah, me neither. I'm not counting on it, and I loved Ryan Williams as well. Definitely a Virginia Tech back that we could agree on wholeheartedly. I'll say this: this is not likely to happen. But if there is a player that's sitting out there that Dallas should get, and most people will probably disagree with this pick, and it's because he's a PR nightmare. But he's sitting there. He's been cleared, and he is probably the best free agent running back out there. And Lord knows that Greg Hardy's sitting there on that roster, and Nick and Mr. Randy Gregory's on that roster, and Des Bryant's on that roster, and a whole host of players who were at-risk players are sitting on those rosters. And I would say that it would probably be a good idea for them to consider this guy, Mr. Ray Rice, who played really hurt the season before the domestic violence incident that he had where he knocked out his wife or his fiance. But when you saw him in the preseason, he looked fresh again. He looked good. He looked good against the 49ers. It was preseason, but it was against the first team unit, and he looked more like himself. The team felt that way. This is a guy that could carry the weight for this team in Dallas, and Dallas is a team that's trying to continue its window of being a contender. They're not trying to build and they're trying to win a Super Bowl while Tony Romo is still upright. And this is a player that can do that. This is also a player that, again, what he did was certainly heinous. And I would say that, I'm just going to say this personally. I think that, our justice system failed. I think our justice system fails when we give players these kinds of punishments for these types of crimes, because Ray Rice in a jail right now would be target number one, and I can tell you that from family who basically say that prisoners do not like people who hit wives or hurt children, and that they end up becoming targets. But I will say that, outside of any type, what I feel about Ray Rice, if I was looking at a team that was like, here's a guy that's been cleared by the legal system, here's a team that allows a player like Greg Hardy to be a part of its organization, who has behaved in a very similar fashion, then I would say if they're comfortable PR-wise to do that, the only difference is that everyone saw what Ray Rice did. You have to read what Greg Hardy did, and that's really the only difference with this type of a matter. But if you're playing to win and if you're showing that you don't care that Greg Hardy's on your team, then why not a Ray Rice who's at least said, I'm sorry, I've embarrassed myself, I've embarrassed organizations, I've embarrassed my wife, I've caused great pain and suffering to my wife, and I've gotten, and I'm trying to do everything I can to make amends. This is a guy that I would be willing to bet, even though, again, like I said, I think he belongs in jail. I'd be willing to bet that he'd be one of the few guys, not like Michael Vick or not like some of the other players that we've had come through with crimes, that would be willing to say, I'll do domestic violence programs and be hated for the next 10, 15, 20 years if it gives me the chance to send the message that you don't do this. Because he's already been doing some of that. Well before and well behind the scenes, and not trying to make a media push out of it. Whereas if you ask Michael Vick if he'd be willing to do that, he cuts short interviews and says goodbye, when it comes to what he did with dogs. So to me, again, I don't like it, but if I'm the Cowboys and you really want to win, this is the talent that you should be looking at.
Yeah, my next subject, in fact, was Ray Rice. Bloom, take the baton and run with it.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on this fit?
Sure. Well, and remember, this is a Cowboys team that Josh Brent got in a drunk driving accident that killed his teammate, and he was welcomed back to the team.
Yeah.
So, and I do think actually Matt brings up a good point that whatever PR hit, and that's the calculation. Look, let's not be naive here. If you can still play, there's a spot in the league for you. But in the post-Ray Rice Yeah. In the post-Ray Rice NFL, teams proceed with caution, and teams do these internal uh, calculations in a way of what is the worst of the team, what is it going to cost the team, and there are franchises like Carolina, for instance, speaking of Greg Hardy, that have just said we're not going to bother with it now. Maybe that's a temporary thing, maybe that's a permanent thing, but Dallas obviously is in the column of franchises that is willing to bring guys into the locker room that might be shunned elsewhere. And again, as I've talked about this with Randy Gregory, I think it creates a placebo effect. I think it creates something where a player can come in and say, we can make this work for you. We accept you, and it allows the player. And look, with Ray Rice, you will get gratitude, I think, if you sign him at this point. I think that Ray Rice is staring down the barrel of never being able to make another dollar off of football again, and I think that you will have a sense of some duty, I think Ray Rice will have to the team that gives him a chance. And we have to remember, before he was ushered out of the NFL last year in the preseason, he looked like he had his old Ray Rice burst back. So I agree, and I'm looking down our list of dynasty leagues. I know that Matt has Ray Rice in one of our leagues. I have him in 3 of my leagues. I picked him up every time I saw him drop last year. I picked him up just because I know he can still play. And eventually, and we saw it happen much quicker with Greg Hardy, but eventually, if you can play, the league's going to give you another chance. So I think that's fascinating. And I think even if Dallas doesn't take a chance on him, it's just they're waiting for those scales to tip. And at some point, the scales will tip. Remember, when the Michael Vick stuff came down, you would have sworn he would never play in the league again, just because of the number of people saying, like, the way he treated dogs, I don't ever, if he comes to my town, I'll turn my back on him. I don't even want to see him on the opposing team. Now, Vic did do a prison term, which does make people feel more like, hey, he paid his debt. But we also saw that we were bracing for this outrage of Vic returning to the league, and it really dissipated pretty quickly. So I'm not sure. This is a question that definitely there are teams, I'm sure, having this conversation now that Rice has been cleared. Perhaps people will feel a little sense of a lack of closure because he went through pretrial diversion and his charges were dismissed because he complied with all the conditions that the court set on it. But at the same time, that means, he complied with everything. And look, I've seen some people talk about the fact that his charges have been dismissed now as some sort of travesty. And I suppose because of the prominent nature of him as a defendant and because of the evidence that came out after, I don't recall whether that was evidence that the DA had or not. But I do think in a typical first offense domestic violence case, especially one where the two parties ended up married, the victim and the assailant, this would be commonly how it's handled. And now you can get into a larger discussion of how domestic violence is handled in our justice system, and that's a conversation I'd love to have, but this is not out of the norm
Right.
of how our domestic, and it's
It
a
is
long.
what it is.
Yeah, my brain is overloaded with things to say about it, but the point is that these kinds of conversations are happening now, and eventually the scales are going to tip where someone's going to give him a chance.
Well, it's a larger topic that I dare not even bring up, but it was appalling in ways to me that there were more people outraged over what Vic did than what Ray Rice did. And both are heinous, okay, to animal lovers everywhere, which all 3 of us are, and to dog owners everywhere. Heinous act. But there seemed to be lack of appropriate response from some about Ray Rice's incident as well. It is the Audible Live. It is Thursday night. We've got a couple of more topics to go over again here. Thanks everyone out there for listening, subscribing on iTunes, checking us out on YouTube, giving us the old thumbs up and the like. You like us. You really like us. So let's continue the conversation next about Saints quarterback Drew Brees discussing his future, not worried about Garrett Grayson. I kind of did chuckle, Bloom, when I wrote that news blurb, like, of course he's not worried about Garrett Grayson. Grayson's going to be the 3rd-string guy this year, and you're going to see Luke McCown, Ryan Griffin compete for that 2nd-string job, and Brees has some more time. But let's look at the tea leaves, Bloom, and let's talk about the overreaction, underreaction out there from fantasy owners. There are still people that will think, well, this is the same old Drew Brees, and they're going to keep throwing. No, let's look at this team being more run heavy. Let's look at this team losing two dear weapons in Jimmy Graham, Kenny Stills this offseason. Let's look at how this Saints team could be more balanced. It's a common notion we talk about when we bring up Peyton Manning on our Broncos show, Bloom, but it seems to be that Breeze, from some, is kind of getting a pass. Your thought about him this season, this new, perhaps even more balanced offense than we're predicting, and where Breeze would rank in your eyes?
You have to be realistic. I took Breeze down to about quarterback 9 or quarterback 10. You have to be realistic because of him losing Graham and Stills and replacing them with C.J. Spiller. And C.J. Spiller could be one of the key players. His ability to stay healthy, he could be one of the key players in this offense of whether it remains a somewhat high-flying offense or is an offense that tries to, every team wants to run the ball more, but actually starts to shrink away from that powerful offense in terms of wattage, in terms of putting points on the board and gaining yards that has been in the past. I do think, I think Andres Pete is a terrific pick. I bet you the Giants are wishing they take. No, I don't know if they're really wishing that, but they'd be better off right now if they'd taken Pete instead of Flowers.
Oh yeah.
So you like that as for some stability, but I think Spiller and his ability to stay healthy, he's going to fill some of the Sproles' role in the offense, and he's that third player. And Josh Hill maybe would be the 3A. If Hill and Spiller can live up to expectations, then perhaps Breeze could end up being a real value as the 9th or 10th quarterback off the board. But where Breeze is going, I'd rather take Russell Wilson. Heck, I'd rather still take Peyton Manning. Because he was a number 1, number 2 overall fantasy quarterback before his quad injury. And there's questions about what we want to talk up to this, but I'm still finding myself much more fascinated with Spiller in this offense because, and Bob Harris and I talked about this on the couch this week, Chan Gailey made Spiller a star in Buffalo. And I do think that Sean Payton is going to spread the field for him. I do think Sean Payton will get him the ball in space. I think Sean Payton will not try to make him a square peg and a round hole between the tackles. On that fast track, with the opportunities he can get, there's targets to be collected here. Some will be collected by Hill, some will be collected by Cooks, probably not as many by Colston. And Spiller's the guy now. Every time I try to get out, he keeps pulling me back in.
You sound like, I've been watching a lot of Sopranos, Bloom, so you sound like Silvio. Like, it keeps every time I want out.
Yeah, it's good Pacino, but no.
Matt, you're up and talking about the Saints offense. I want to highlight Josh Hill in this conversation as Bloom brought him up there. Your thoughts and expectations from this guy, Idaho State, not the Vandals, but Idaho State, and led the NCAA in receptions for tight end that final season in college, 2012, had 70 catches. A player that was at the Shrine Game a few years ago, along with, you'll remember these fantasy favorites. Zach Sudfeld was at that game. Joseph Fourier was at that game, got hurt right in front of me. Shocking, I know. And Chris Pantali, who's still kicking around the league, by the way. So that's a nice little group of tight ends there at that Shrine Game. Hill was one of them, and unlike Pantali, who was a Monday standout and then faded away, and unlike Sudfeld, who everyone can't stand now because of what he should have been, but Hill was solid all around. We've seen this guy come through, and you look at last season with Josh Hill and kind of making his way behind Jimmy Graham, 14 catches, okay, but 5 for touchdowns. What can he do this season with the larger role?
I think that he can be helpful. I don't think you're going to get Jimmy Graham replacement, and I don't think anyone's expecting that at all. But I do think you can look at top 6 to 8 tight end numbers. And I think that if that happens, then you're going to see Drew Brees closer to the top 5 than at the bottom part of the top 10. But again, you look at this roster as a whole, and this roster is one of the more fascinating depth charts that I've seen, only because this is where every fantasy analyst is reaching for for somebody that could be their favorite, somebody to hold on to as the high upside special? Is it Brandon Coleman, the Rutgers tall, kind of fast, can make some adjustments to the ball when he can actually track the football? Can it be Santavius Jones, who went to my rival high school when I was growing up, and who has all this nice athleticism, but was as raw as a piece of kale that you picked out of the ground? And then you have guys like Joe Morgan, who has been like the eternal favorite of like July and August as someone to watch in training camp, and has either gotten hurt and hasn't been able to come through. So when you look at these types of players, you've got an older Colston, you've got Cooks who really looked good out of the gate, and just couldn't, he needs to stay healthy. But you also need to see whether or not he can be the guy now. Is he going to be running free in the middle now that Jimmy Graham isn't there? Our teams are going to be that afraid of Josh Hill? I don't think they are yet. They're going to let Josh Hill do his thing. So to me, it really does come down to how good can Hill be, how good can Spiller be, and how well used he's gonna work out, and then how healthy Colston can stay. And if those three things happen, then you've got the danger that Cooks can present, and then it makes that really nice dynamic offense where there's a lot of guesswork that's involved by the defense, and Breeze can kind of be, and still being a mid-tier QB1. Another guy that I would just keep an eye on, and I'm not saying he's an upside guy, but in the sense of just watch for him. Don't add him. Don't go out there in your 50-man dynasty league and add him to your roster because I'm talking about him. But Orson Charles of Georgia. Okay, Orson Charles has always been talented as a receiver, and to me, the fact that he's getting added to this depth chart behind former Georgia alum Ben Watson, who I'm sure has been back to the program at times, probably during Charles's career, and Charles having a couple of incidents with cars and bad behavior, one with drinking and then one with road rage, has bought him basically. Lowered his draft stock and then got him a ticket out of town from Tennessee, and now he's in New Orleans. But if there's a guy that if he has that near career death experience, as our buddy here Bloom often talks about, if there's someone who's a candidate to be turned and see the light and suddenly look like, where did this guy come from? Orson Charles might be that guy. Again, watch for it. Don't buy it or invest in it. But that's why this depth chart to me is just wholly fascinating, because then there's Kyrie Robinson, who's still sitting there as the number 3 back, or Tim Hightower if he actually comes back from this knee infection, and you look at that and you wonder, does he have any juice left? And if he does, and Ingram gets hurt and Spiller gets hurt and Robinson gets hurt, like we've seen with running backs in the past, suddenly we're looking at guys that were wouldn't have even thought of at this point, but in September are suddenly become stories. So I would say with this, Drew Brees, 8 to 10 is probably smarter. I'd rather have Ben Roethlisberger, than Drew Brees in this particular case. Maybe even Matt Ryan if this offensive line actually gets a little super glue that holds it together. I'd probably pick Brees over Ryan, but it's close this year. So it's a fascinating thing, and really you're just going to have to stay tuned and see how well these running backs and these younger receivers are gelling.
If he takes that next step, it wouldn't shock me. I'm not predicting it, and I wouldn't rank him above Drew Brees at this time, but if he takes the next step, Ryan Tannehill could be a better fantasy quarterback than Drew Brees this season. By the way, you bring up Orson Charles and the road rage. He just thinks he's this guy. What a day. What a lovely day. By the way, it's a freaking awesome movie. I'm going to go see it again this week.
He must still think he lives in Athens, because in Athens you can get anywhere in 15 minutes. So that's probably half of his problem, is that you can get there anywhere in 15 minutes, and and when you're driving at night with a little juice in you, probably maybe no one noticed. I don't know. Apparently they did. He was trying to go extra slow. It didn't work out for him.
Something about you Georgia drivers, Matt. I've ridden in the car with you several times to know that other than a New York taxi cab, my life has never flashed before my eyes. Even when I went 200 miles an hour down I-25.
You should come with me when we drive to Jamaica. When we drive to, we'll do that. I'll drive you in Jamaica. You will think that you're in a Lebanon cab, actually, probably at that point.
By the way, Orson Charles, when he took a recruiting trip to Florida, he broke their national championship.
Yeah, he dropped it. It was great.
The crystal football, he broke it.
Yeah, yeah, he dropped it.
Whoops. Great
Best
hit.
drop of all time for Georgia fans right there.
Oh, the jab. He's getting the jabs in, ladies and gentlemen. Audible Live, we got a question before we wrap things up here. Bloom, super quick, Bloom. I just want to know what you've heard. Have we heard anything, before we get to our Twitter question?
Yeah.
Have we heard anything on the Carlos Hyde injury? A very interesting piece came across the wire today. This one is from Matt Mayako, friend of the show. And by the way, if Matt Barrows, Matt Mayako, top of the list, top line guys, great guys. Mayako, so generous and gracious with his time. And if you're looking for 49ers info, those are the guys you go to. He reported via Twitter that Hyde is nursing a leg injury. Nothing else. We have is anything else coming out on this Carlos Hyde leg injury?
Nothing yet. But not like you needed more reasons. I will say, drilling down on, I'm going to see if Mayaka gave us anything in the last couple of hours on Twitter. But while I'm looking for that, again, I'm going back. He did not. It sounds like Hyde declined to elaborate on his injury, and this is kind of ominous. He said, "Trust in God's timing." He tweeted.
What?
So he did. Yeah, undisclosed leg injury. Tom Sula said he's working through the leg injury. It's nothing. We want you 100%. We want you doing the off-season thing, and we're doing things fast, and we're doing all those things, so we're not going to push. It's not the season, so we're trying to treat that the right way. But look, I'm starting to sort of sour on Carlos Hyde as a fantasy pick this year in the third or fourth round. Some of the same reasons I'm souring on Alfred Morris, to be honest, where you're seeing a limited weekly ceiling. They're going to use Reggie Bush in his typical role, which limits the upside of the running back next to him. But going back and watching some San Francisco, and I don't want to be too harsh here, man, Colin Kaepernick's pocket presence, it's just so rough sometimes. And I do think if teams overplay the run, this is all team. San Francisco is just a team looking to take a big step back in general. You lose locker room leadership. You lose tons of players on the defensive side of the ball. You lose Mike Iupati. And I think that Colin Kaepernick, as more of the stress of winning games is going to fall on his shoulders, is not going to do well. And this could also be, and no disrespect to Jim Tomsula, but this could be one of those situations where we had a kind of a public divorce between York and Harbaugh, and Harbaugh obviously made this team great. What is it going to be without him? The range of destinations there, and we could get Dr. Gene and get his stethoscope out, Gia Gene, to see what the vitals are on the San Francisco team, because I don't think they're good. And again, I'm operating in May at this high level of like, do I want part of this offense? Do I want the San Francisco running back? I don't think so. So hearing something like this just makes it that much easier, and that Mike Davis is pretty good. And Mike Davis could easily force his way into the Carlos Hyde role, and Carlos Hyde moves to the Frank Gore role. But again, looking at what Frank Gore did last year, even though it was a 1,000-yard season, from a fantasy standpoint, we were basically treating him as a flex or a low running back too. That's what we could be lining Hyde up for any number of reasons. And to me, that's not worth a third or fourth round pick.
I like Mike Davis a hell of a lot more than Matt Jones, who we spent enough time with earlier in the program. Is Mike Davis going to be motivated? That's my question. And is Jim Tomsula, when you have a creepy level, when you got to grunt every time you talk, like, oh, come on. You could do better than that, San Francisco. Why? Oh, yeah, because he'll say yes and he won't say no. A lot of San Francisco people upset with everything that's going on there. So we will get to our Twitter question. We'll tie a bow on tonight's program. And this one comes in via Twitter from Jay DeTuno on Twitter. And he says, PPR specifically, but can you talk about Watkins and Latimer versus the top rookie wide receivers in redraft? So redraft, PPR, Watkins, Latimer, and then those top rookie wide receivers who we spent a lot of time talking about before the draft, Amari Cooper, Kevin White, et cetera, et cetera. Matt, as I toss this to you, and obviously get a lot of questions about Cody Latimer, who is an emerging presence and an emerging target, but we're also talking about a guy that's going to have a breakout year with about 25 or 30 catches. Okay? And go back and look at the history. Third wide receivers under Gary Kubiak don't do anything.
Right.
What you're hoping with Cody Latimer, and he's got the talent, okay? If this Demaryius thing gets ugly, and he either holds out or plays his 1 year on the franchise tender and then leaves Denver, Latimer steps in, starts. You still have Emmanuel Sanders for a song. He may hold out next year. He's making what, $5 million annually. So anyway, my point is, if Thomas goes bye-bye, Latimer can step in and start, catch 100 passes. Okay, that's if Demaryius goes bye-bye. So the talk about move Sanders inside, yeah. On a limited basis, this is a two tight end offense. The race of catches between Virgil Green and Cody Latimer will be there. I've got them both about the same, about 30 catches. And Green may get more. What you're hoping with Latimer is that he flashes the natural ability that we all know that he has. And what you're hoping this year is maybe out of those 25, 30 catches, he has 7 touchdowns. Give him the old Martavis Bryant treatment. But so for people thinking, Latimer and this is a different offense. It's a different coaching style. The third receiver doesn't do anything in this offense. They will go to him sometimes. He'll be on the outside. He can start eventually one day, just not this year, not unless there's an injury above him. So Latimer, Watkins in redraft PPR, Matt, versus this rookie class. What do you think?
No, I mean, obviously it's going to be Watkins in a redraft league, and for a lot of the reasons that you stated. The problem is what you're hoping for with Latimer is Marlon Brown type of numbers from his rookie year, where he had 8 touchdowns and he became that red zone threat that they could use as that third wide receiver. Latimer's a better prospect than Brown, and certainly Jacoby Jones was never a Cody Latimer. So we can't, we look back in the Texans days where they tried to use him as a third receiver, or Kevin Walter. So when you look at those caliber of athletes, they don't even compare to what I think Latimer has to offer right now. But again, it also depends on the defense. If the Broncos defense can't help them stay off, if the Broncos defense is an issue, then yeah, they might pass more. But right now, you're not going to count on the Broncos not being a good defense. You're going to count on them offering enough defense and Peyton Manning doing enough with his play calling in the run game that Latimer is a limited player this year, barring injury. But he's still a player that you want to pick up. You want him as someone probably after the 10th round in your drafts that you can consider as depth, especially with Sanders and Thomas. I mean, certainly Sanders isn't the biggest guy, and he does get put in situations where he has to stretch out for balls, where he has to, make some tough plays because Manning trusts him an awful lot. So it gives you that opportunity to have somebody that can take advantage of a shot to start if he's an injury substitute. But Watkins is going to be that guy. With what Watkins did last year, with the bad ribs as a rookie season, with quarterback play that was just a carousel of horrors, and he still had nearly 1,000 yards. That was it was a carousel of horrors, not horrors, but horrors. Yeah. So it really was a pretty bad thing. Now you're going to get Matt Castle. I don't know how much better that's going to be, but still, Castle has some signs of being aggressive, wanting to throw downfield, and I think that Watkins is a damn sight better than anything that the New York Jets have had in the past 5 to 7 years at the wide receiver position, barring maybe Santonio Holmes in that first year out of Pittsburgh. So I like that. And then when you look at Dynasty maybe, or compared to this rookie class, I think Amari Cooper will have a better season. I think Kevin White will have a better season um, than than Latimer in terms of if you had to if you had to project them as where they're going to be right now. Latimer has a chance to exceed both of them if he gets to play as an injury substitute. But as of his role as the number 3, you still want to put him well behind even rookies who are going to play as starters right out of the gate. And I think that Watkins should end up posting equal or greater production than he did last year, which makes him to me probably better than Kevin White, and probably equal or greater than Amari Cooper in this particular situation. So dynasty-wise, though, Cody Latimer, to me, talent, just pure talent, was on par with Kevin White, I think. Maybe not quite as good, but pretty close.
Better run blocker. Bloom, you're up in this conversation, and ironic that we're talking about a guy who worked as a rookie under John Fox. And this year, we're going to talk about a rookie who will be working under John Fox, and he hates rookies. But Kevin White's there. Does Jay Cutler listen? How's this offense look under Gase? And how does Jay Cutler respond? So, rookie class v. Watkins v. Latimer, what do you think?
Sure. I mean, for Dynasty, it's really hard to back off of Sammy Watkins because long term, I think the ceiling is still intact. Short term, again, Buffalo, Rex Ryan. And I'm backing away from him in redraft because of that. And I can spin a yarn that goes both ways. One is that he was banged up last year. He was playing with terrible quarterbacks. He still almost had 1,000 yards. But this year, I mean, the passing pie is going to get even smaller. They added Percy Harvin. They added Charles Clay. It's just rough. Perhaps I'm underestimating how much of a hit his dynasty stock should take because of that.
You're relying on Harvin?
What's that? No, well, no, I'm not. I'm just saying that what little there is, another mouth to feed. And Charles Clay's a good player too. So there's 2 more mouths. They played Charles Clay a lot of money. There's 2 more mouths to feed there. Yeah, it's rough. Watkins for redraft, I find myself backing further and further away from, and really having him below a lot of the players in his tier that are going ahead of him in drafts that I'm doing right now, at least. Latimer, you like him a little bit for best ball because, as you mentioned, you may see over a quarter of his catches go for touchdowns, but he's not going to be a big enough, consistent enough part of the pass offense without an injury to Sanders, which is possible, or Thomas, which is possible. But otherwise, he's not going to be a big enough part of the pass offense to have every week redraft relevance. What you want to see this year is that talent that Matt was talking about, and flashes of that talent that will kind of how Martavis Bryant last year, even though he was way up and down and maybe wasn't a reliable fantasy player, really reinforced and solidified his dynasty stock by showing that high ceiling, that high talent ceiling. I think that's what we're hoping for Latimer this year, although it probably won't translate to fantasy relevance. So then stepping back and looking at this year's rookie class, I think that there's at least 5, right off the top of my head, you're going to take Aguilar, Perryman, White, Cooper, Parker over Latimer. Parker's in a somewhat similar situation to Latimer, but Parker could do more. And I agree with you, Cease, by the way, that Ryan Tannehill is someone. I'm watching a lot of Miami today. We have this bar for quarterbacks. Like, if they're not perfect, then they're trash. And
the snob theory, yeah.
And I'm a snob about everything, but Tannehill does a lot of nice things.
Get that drop.
Yeah. He does a lot of nice things, and he has now a receiver in Parker that he hasn't had this kind of receiver before. And I think Tannehill's a smart quarterback. I think he's a confident quarterback. I think he's a quarterback who sees the field with clarity and makes decisions with confidence in himself and confidence in his teammates. And I think that all fits right into Devontae Parker's wheelhouse. So there's at least 5 off the top of my head, easy, that I would take in a redraft situation over, when I take Watkins over Cooper, over Aguilar, probably, but more likely I'd look to another position and hope to get Aguilar around later, or hope to get Perryman 2 or 3 rounds later. Then I would take Watkins. So while Watkins might be ranked higher. From a desirability on my team at his ADP standpoint, Watkins is still very low.
That is the Audible for this Thursday night, everyone. We appreciate each and every one of you out there for listening, for hanging out with us here on our Google Hangout. We do have Memorial Day coming up, and just want to remind everyone, whether you're at the airport or the grocery store or whatever, if you see an active duty soldier or even a veteran that has his VA hat on or Navy hat on, what have you, just go up and say thanks, and tell them thanks for serving our country. The men and women of our armed forces do such a great job in what they do and the sacrifices them and their families make. So this day, this Memorial Day, every day, make sure to nod the head to that gracefulness. As we wrap up tonight's show, Matt, final thoughts.
Just want to wish everyone a happy and safe Memorial Day, and certainly when we look at the upcoming season, mini camps underway, and these rookies are getting acclimated to what they're doing. I think Matt Bowen over at Bleacher Report does a really excellent job talking about really why, what that acclimation period entails, and what we should be looking to, forward to when it comes to training camps. So, over this period of time, I think it's a, good opportunity for us to, start our projections and get our rankings underway, and then we can see the real deal in training camp, and I'm looking forward to that.
Bloom, final thoughts?
Yeah, it's fun to now get past that barrier of the draft, and to use Evan Silva's phrase again, we're planting our flags, doing MFL 10 drafts, content starting to be churned out, and I'm working on a couple of big projects that I hope to roll out in a little bit of the dog days of summer with respect to football. That's usually August, but June and early July, when we have some time to really meditate and stare on this stuff, going back and watching more of last year. So it's fun. I mean, right now I'm having an argument on Twitter about Mike Evans' floor in touchdowns this year. I think Mike Evans' 15 touchdowns sounds perfectly reasonable, but this is what's fun, is these debates, and we're all bringing out all the information and research and everything that are leading to these conclusions, but they're all under construction, written in pencil. So this is a really fun time to be talking about this stuff, thinking it through, doing some of these drafts, seeing how teams come together, and it's always a blast. Our audience, y'all are so generous and so supportive, and make it so easy for us to do what we do. So it's a real privilege to get to do it, and I hope we have another great journey this year.
Well, we have a high information crowd. I've said it 1,000 times. We've got a high information crowd, very, very savvy and knowledgeable football fans. We appreciate everyone out there for listening. Bloom, also, we need to alert our listeners and viewers about the Football Guys Early Bird Special. Break it down for us.
$26.95. You're going to get, I think it's through the end of the month, 30 days from the date of purchase, money back guarantee. Look, I'll just say it this way: whether it's apps, whether it's the Audible, or whether it's the subscription, whatever we ask you for, we're going to return tenfold or more. The Audible's free; we just ask for your time and attention. I hope that we continue to return that. But I think anybody who had either of our apps last year, and there's more coming down the pike, stay tuned on that. If you gave us what we asked for an app, I think it was $5 last year, you got so much more in return. As it is, the regular price, I believe it's going to be $32.95 this year, more than worth it, whether you're doing DFS, IDP, Dynasty, Redraft, you name it, even just for the $35,000 subscriber contest entry. But when you have that discount, and just get you're an early adopter, like you said, high information sees. You're home, Football Guys. And this is just a way to seal the deal.
And make it happen, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Cecil Lammy for the great Matt Waldman and the fantastic Sigmund Bloom, saying thank you very much. We love you guys. Stay tuned and stay frosty.